A father charged with murdering his young daughter now found dead behind bars. Authorities confirming Andrew Wiley died while awaiting trial, months after being accused of killing 12-year-old Lori Paige. Now, disturbing new evidence emerging, officials saying Wiley may have gotten Lori pregnant before her death. Coming up, more on Wiley's official cause of death and the disturbing new allegations changing the direction of the case. I'm Kennedi Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. You're watching Law and Crime. A father is dead before ever standing trial for the murder of his own daughter. The Leon County Sheriff's Office confirming that Andrew Wiley died of natural causes resulting from a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that blocks and stops blood flow to an artery in the lung. His death came just 2 months after being charged with second-degree murder in the death of his 12-year-old daughter, Lori Paige. Lori vanished from their Tallahassee home more than 2 years ago. Wiley was the one who reported her missing, telling investigators Lori left overnight with her backpack while he was working a late shift. But from the very beginning, detectives questioned the story, launching a multi-state search across Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee, and still finding no sign of Lori. Her case was made even more difficult by what she didn't have. No phone, no social media, and no digital trail to follow. And adding to the complexity, a fractured family who lived in different states. As the months stretched on, Wiley's version of events began unraveling. Then, a break. In February 2024, detectives seized a phone from Wiley's home.
A forensic analysis uncovers questionable internet searches, including queries about remote areas with bodies of water in Alabama and Georgia. March 2024, as more consistencies in Wiley's statements are identified and new information about his relationship with Lori emerges, detectives shift their focus more heavily towards Wiley.
That same month, investigators searched his vehicle, finding a pistol, ammunition, and a bottle of cleaning fluid marked specifically to remove blood. The car's carpet was sent to the crime lab and tested positive for Lori's blood. But it wasn't until April of 2025, after a prescribed burn cleared the heavy brush, that Lori was found in Thomas County, Georgia. All that remained of her were 2 bones.
Lori deserves a safe home and a full life. While today's arrest will never bring her back, it does bring us one step closer to justice.
Prosecutors charged Wiley with her murder, alleging the 36-year-old father killed his daughter, then dumped her body. Now the motive is coming into focus. State Attorney Jack Campbell told WCTV that sexual assault was most likely behind the crime, saying evidence shows Wiley may have impregnated his 12-year-old daughter. Campbell went on to say there may have been an altercation, one that turned deadly, suggesting this could have been a crime of passion. But with Wiley now dead, he'll never stand trial. And here to break down this story with me is coroner Nada Rutherford. Nada, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just dive right in. This case has so many layers. From your end, when a suspect dies in custody before trial, how does that change the scope of your work?
So let me just be transparent to say that I am a nurse practitioner by training, and I actually worked in the jail system and provided care to inmates who were awaiting trials, who were awaiting that big court case. And so what I know for certain is that when they are incarcerated in a local jail, that they receive a health exam, and pulmonary embolism is not something that's going to show up in that health exam. You'll have people who say, well, how did they not see this coming? Something like this can happen randomly and it can happen naturally. Now, here's the caveat. When you have someone who is incarcerated, an autopsy is automatically a part of their death investigation. And so even though the pulmonary embolism could be a natural thing, it does not mean that the death itself is natural, because you could get in a fight with someone, you could have a fracture, you could have an injury that could increase your risk of developing a pulmonary embolism.
I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this news package. Odoo is a powerful all-in-one business software that helps you manage everything from sales to accounting and, yes, inventory. Their inventory dashboard makes it easy to track receipts, delivery orders, POS orders, and see what's waiting, late, or back ordered at a glance. You can pay for receipts, automate vendor reminders, and schedule deliveries all in just a few clicks. Plus, you get full warehouse management, the ability to set picking strategies, and real-time stock visibility. And the best part, Odoo's inventory app syncs seamlessly with your sales and e-commerce apps, so everything stays connected. So right now you can get a free 15-day trial of Odoo's all-in-one business solution and see how it can make your life easier. Check it out at odoo.com/lcnewsinventory. So what actually happens in the body during something like that?
So it's a blood clot basically in the lungs. And when they say embolism, that means that it has moved from some other place. So very commonly, you'll have something called a deep vein thrombosis, which is a clot in the lower leg. A piece of that clot breaks off and finds its way into the lungs or other parts of the body. And so he could have been in a fight. He could have had an altercation. Something could have happened to him. And so we don't just chalk this up as a natural occurrence. We investigate those deaths because those deaths matter in terms of the investigative process. And so when we investigate these deaths, we do so by doing a full investigation. It's not just, okay, whatever the autopsy report says, we'll just run with that. We make sure that we investigate it like it's a homicide, and then we rule it natural if we come to that conclusion.
Well, can you just walk us through how the investigation goes, how you know if there was no foul play involved?
Well, one, I would look to see, I would be interviewing the COs who were taking care of Mr. Wiley. I would be looking at any video footage that's available of him. Who last saw him alive? What were the incidents surrounding his death? What circumstances led them to discover that he had a pulmonary embolism? Was this just an incidental finding when they did the autopsy? Was he complaining of something? I've had cases where an inmate is complaining of shortness of breath, or they're saying, hey, something doesn't feel right in my chest, and they're complaining about being super tired, which you would think in a jail system, like, no one's really paying that much attention to that. But did he ask to go to medical? Did someone neglect his medical care? Did someone just say, oh, you'll be fine, go in your cell and sit down? And so those things become a part of the investigation. And it doesn't matter why an inmate may be housed in a jail, their health and the wellness of that person is supposed to be taken care of by that facility. And so we do an investigation as objectively as possible, and we try not to focus on why that person may have been incarcerated.
Is it common to see someone die of a pulmonary embolism in jail? Are there risk factors that make it more common behind bars?
No, there's no research that I know of that says that if you're behind bars, you're more likely to die of this. But what I will tell you is that with what he was accused of, sometimes there's some vigilante justice that happens in the jail system. And so I would be very interested to know, had Mr. Wiley gotten into any sort of altercation? Did someone hurt him? Did he have a fracture of any sort? I know the autopsy report is preliminary right now, but I would want to know some of those other things to see if this death was truly a natural, spontaneous occurrence, or did someone hurt him in a way that increased his risk for developing a PE.
What would that type of injury look like that would make his risk go up?
Any sort of deep trauma to the body, blunt force injury, or a fracture. Fractures increase your risk of a pulmonary embolism. And let me just give you a real quick example, Kennedy. There was a case where a woman had her leg broken in a domestic violence altercation. She went to the hospital. They knew about the fracture. The next day, she died from a pulmonary embolism. And so while the PE, that's what we call it in the medical world, while the PE is a normal thing that can happen, when you have a fracture, it can increase your risk significantly, plus the other blunt force trauma to her body. So that death was actually ruled as a homicide and not just as a natural death. So it really does matter.
Wow. Well, let's dive into the case and what the suspect was accused of. Police say that Lori's blood was found in Mr. Wiley's car. When blood is found, how is that sample tested and confirmed to be from a specific person?
It's as simple as DNA. They can take samples of blood, whether that blood is dried or not, even if it's old blood. Um, the DNA is still there. It doesn't get erased. And so even if someone has tried to clean up a scene, if there is any fragment of that person left behind, they can usually extract DNA from it.
Let's talk about the cleaning fluid that was found. It was supposedly that fluid supposed to help with removing blood stains, but police still found traces of Lori's blood, allegedly. What makes a blood trace stand out even after it's been cleaned?
Well, you have to think that blood is red, right? It goes through our body and it comes out red. And so when you have the hemosiderin in that blood that causes that kind of staining, you can try to clean it up, but traces of it will be left behind.
Lori's remains were found 2 years after she went missing. What's the biggest challenge in a case with such a long gap?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest challenge for me as I read over the details of this horrifying case was that she was believed to be pregnant. She was believed to have possibly contracted an STD from her father. Like, just the idea of that is so mind blowing. But the hardest part about this is that when a body is left out in a wooded area, there's animal activity, there's all sorts of bug activity, insect activity, there's the moisture, there's the ground, there's the returning of the body to the earth, so to speak. And at some point that body breaks down. You can have skeletonization of a body within 7 days when it's exposed outside. And she was there for 2 years. So this young woman experienced so many horrible things in her life, seemingly. And to think of her just out in the woods and possible animal activity, kind of dragging her bones off, is very sad to me. But the worst part is that we lose some of the DNA from this possible fetus that was inside of her, where we could have proven the paternity to be her father, which would have been a direct link to him. And so if it was in fact true that she was pregnant, we lose that, because unless she was pretty far along, those things would have just kind of dissipated into the earth, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's such a sad and tragic story all the way around when you think about this young, beautiful girl and just the way that her life supposedly ended. What's the first thing you look for in terms of establishing identity, especially when a person has been missing for so long? And like how you said, there had to be some decomposition.
Well, honestly, when we find someone and we don't know the identity, right? Let's say they're from another state or someone dumped them in the county where I am. The first thing we start with is missing person cases. We measure the femur bone. We enlist the help of our anthropologists and say, okay, your specialty is bones. Tell us how long this femur bone is so that we can hopefully get a range of height for this person. And then we submit any DNA that we can find. Sometimes that involves actually opening up a window into that femur bone and scraping out DNA so that we can send it off for testing. And those things can take a little bit of time, unfortunately. And so the first thing would be to see if there is anything that has a hit in the system. We know the father was alleged of this crime, and so they could have gotten a DNA sample from him to test what they found with this body. The sad part is that she was found 2 years later, and she was found in an area, while close, not really close to her hometown. So when you start looking at missing person cases, you're looking at the people right around that area first. So when they were trying to identify, who she was, of course, they may have an idea about who they think it is, but they still have to wait for confirmatory testing. We also look for things like dental pictures. We know Lori was probably seen at a dentist at some point in her life. When was the last time she was seen there? Do we have any x-rays? Do we have anything like a filling or a cavity, a bridge, braces, any orthodontics records that may be able to help identify her in that way? Because even if someone has been out for that amount of time, sometimes we get really lucky with teeth, and they can really help to break a case wide open.
We know Lori's remains were recovered after a prescribed burn. How do fires affect your ability to identify remains as well?
Oh, it makes it even more difficult. And what I would like to say about burns is that people think that just because you burn a body that you lose everything, and that's just not true. Again, the DNA of that person is still going to be there. Now, if they um, cremate them, if they have temperatures high enough to cremate someone and those bones become like brittle and they can crush them and that sort of thing, then it makes it a lot more difficult. But I don't believe that was the case here with Lori. I think they actually had some pretty large bones to work with in this case. But the burning does make it more difficult because sometimes it makes the bones brittle.
And if we could talk a little more about the scene, just being outside, being in the elements, like how you mentioned, the bugs, the weather, just everything that you have to deal with when you are revisiting an old scene after years, what changes the most?
Oh gosh, I mean, you have to think it's outside. I mean, a number of things could change. Just the morphology of the area. Was there water there? Was there flooding to that area? I mean, so many different things can change. And again, animal activity, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to be, graphic here, but animal activity really does change a lot of things because that's where they live. They dig holes, they move things, they forage for things, and so lots of things could change in that time. You don't know if people were dumping things there and just thought maybe it was a dead animal and didn't know that there was a body there. You just have no idea the things that people do in wooded areas. And unfortunately, people use them for dumping grounds a lot with deceased people, sorry. And so a lot of things can change in the area, but really it's the natural things that happen like precipitation, rain, flooding that can really change an area.
Are there tools or techniques that exist now that may not have existed in 2023 when Lori was first reported missing? Because just wondering how it took so long to find her.
Well, I think you have a number of things at play here. I think sometimes when we're looking at cases from the outside in, we think, well, couldn't they have done this or couldn't they have done that? Things take time. You can't just barge into people's lives and just take whatever you want from their home and take whatever you need from their cell phone. There are processes that must be followed, and so there are subpoenas, there are search warrants, there are all these things that have to happen. And you hope that people will be forthcoming with information, but sometimes they're not. And then you have this case where the father reported his own daughter missing that he allegedly killed. So you have this element of kind of like, do we believe him? Do we not believe him? He said that he was at work. She supposedly went missing. So there's this kind of lag time because he lied. So whether he did it or not, which I think they really believe that he did do this, which is why they brought charges, you led police on a wild goose chase for quite some time when you could have just told the truth in the beginning. So them finding the cell phone in his home, you have to think his brother also helped to lie and cover up for him possibly. So there's so many layers to this case, as you said in the beginning, because people lied. People didn't do what you would expect another human being to do to find Lori.
Well, going back to Lori's potential pregnancy, if they did find her remains and there wasn't a full body for them to test, how did they know that she was pregnant or could have been pregnant?
They can sometimes do testing. So if they can find any sort of tissue, they can try to run it for a specific pregnancy hormone called HCG, and they can sometimes confirm pregnancy that way. But they will also probably take a look at anything they could find with Lori's blood. Remember, blood tells you that you're pregnant, and they do what's called a quant HCG. And so if they found blood, they may have been able to test that post-mortem, and without her body being there, to be able to determine that she was possibly pregnant.
In this case, it took 4 days to identify Lori's remains, according to police. Is that fast? Is that normal?
These things take time, and I think it's individual for each case. The amount of time that it took to identify her, again, you want to be sure. I say this to families all the time, Kennedy. We want to be sure. We don't want to give you somebody else's bad news, right? How many other girls that match Lori's description in terms of height, weight, possible disappearance around the time that she disappeared? Like, how many other girls are missing? And again, she wasn't found in Tallahassee. She was found in Georgia. And so those things take time, and I'm glad they were able to do it fairly quickly, but it's hard to make all those dots connect when you don't have a lot of information.
Well, in this case, the victim's father was accused of killing her, but in other cases, how do you share that kind of information with the family? Do you have to prepare for emotional or legal reactions when you're telling them, hey, we found your loved one, just remains, and this is all we have?
Here's how that conversation goes. We have found a person. We have found the remains of an individual that may or may not be your loved one. I need your help to determine if this is your loved one. Could you please tell me about any injuries that your loved one may have had? Do they have any plates, screws? Do they have a previous fracture? Had they ever broken a bone? When was the last time they went to the dentist? What is the name of that dentist's office? What street is it located on, so we make sure we have the right one? And I hope that this is not your loved one, but if it is, I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that we have a 100% confirmed ID before we give you this news. And usually families are so receptive to that because they want it, they don't necessarily want it to be their person, but they want the closure. And so they're usually very helpful with providing us information.
Does it ever get harder when the victim is a child, or do you find yourself focusing more tightly on the technical side?
It is always hard when it's a child. I'm a mom, Kennedy. I don't know if you're a mom, but I have two teenage boys. And I will tell you, every time a teen dies in our area, I think this could be my kid. And it's emotional, it's hard. That's why I have therapy and Jesus. So I do the things that I need to do for my mental health because the focus is not on me. I need to show up as my best self every single day so that I can give families the answers that they deserve.
Absolutely. Well, how often do you come across cases where physical evidence tells a very different story than what the suspect reported? Because that's what happened here in Lori's case.
Well, we've had several crazy cases here in South Carolina. There was the case of Gabby, whose her mom's boyfriend, or not her mom, well, yeah, her mom's boyfriend was the accused, and he pretended like he didn't know what had happened to her, and he was out there searching for her with her family, and he knew exactly where she was. So this is not uncommon, unfortunately. And when you have complete access to the World Wide Web and you have things like the dark web and they tell you how to get away with crimes, people really do use those sites, which is how they're able to be supported. And people really try to get away with murder. And so the less physical evidence we have, it makes it difficult. But I'll tell you, our police department, our sheriff's department, all of our law enforcement agencies, along with the coroner's office, we work very diligently, nonstop, no sleep until we can get a case closed. And if we can't get that case closed fairly quickly, we never stop looking. I promise you that.
Well, speaking of, just Google searches, according to police, Mr. Wiley searched things like remote areas with bodies of water. What stands out to you as most alarming? The detail, the timing, or the frequency?
The frequency, but also the fact that he knew something about bodies of water. We know that if a body is submerged in water, that it's going to break down faster, which will make that body more unrecognizable faster than if it's just left out to the sun. For example. And so while you may have faster breakdown, the hotter it is. I mean, this is Florida, Georgia, mind you, this is the South. It gets hot. And so even in a shaded area, it can be very warm. But add to that humidity plus a body of water, and you're going to have even more of a breakdown. So it can be fairly fast that this happens. And so the fact that he had some knowledge to even know to look for that is very distressing. But then how long was he doing this? Like, you were searching this often enough that it was a red flag. Like, it just speaks to the premeditated mindset that he had when possibly doing this.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Wiley died before facing trial. How does that affect the overall closure in a case like this for investigators?
I think for investigators, we always want to know why. We always want to know why someone did something. And so when we don't have that why, it kind of it kind of bothers you a little bit. It makes you It makes you emotional because you want to know why this 12-year-old had to die for this. What did you do? Why did you do this? And investigators, with all of the work that goes into this, you want your day in court. You want to be able to show the family how hard you worked to find answers. And when you don't get that, it is kind of a letdown, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, such a crazy story here, and one that we have been following for a long time. Nada, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Kennedy. I appreciate it.
Andrew Wiley's brother, Antoine, told WCTV that Wiley maintained his innocence until his death. Wiley said his brother intended to present a defense at trial that Lori was seen by witnesses after the time at which the police said she died. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.